Morning. I wanted to discuss leaving grain behind and leaving hay behind when you take your horses out, and what do you do with it? Or what does the farm that you keep your horse at do with it? Do you even know what their procedure is? I had a client who had a horse. He was an older horse, and he was missing quite a few teeth. And he also required, he was a thoroughbred, so he required, quite a bit of grain as well to satisfy his body condition. But he was slow at eating, and apparently slower than they preferred for their turnout procedure. And it turned out that they felt that he was wasting grain. So what they would do is they would leave the grain from the morning, and then he would be expected to eat the grain that sat all day with flies and whatever else spent their day. I don't know if you've ever seen something that a lot of flies have landed on, but it's pretty disgusting, the amount of waste that flies leave behind from landing. I believe they say flies throw up upon landing every time. So you figure a fly gets chased away by another fly for the grain, and then it comes back and it lands. There's a lot of fly vomit on your horse's grain if you allow your horse's grain to be exposed to flies for any length of time. So this horse then would come in and, potentially say, ew, and then wouldn't eat that grain. So then come morning, they wouldn't feed him again. He dropped, I'm going to say when they called me and said, could you please go look at him, he had to have been 150 pounds lighter than the last time I had seen him. And that wasn't in a very long period of time. And so we made arrangements to move him. He moved to me. So I got to see what was happening. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I'm making an assumption. I got to see actually what the situation was. Because he was missing teeth, he was a very slow eater. So he required me to feed him either in advance of the other horses, because also what would happen is if your turnout procedure became, started before he was moved, before he was done, being a thoroughbred, being just probably any horse, but I'm not trying to just say thoroughbreds, but, my experience is being a thoroughbred, he started to see the activity of everybody moving. You know what? Scratch the whole thoroughbred thing, because I don't need that to be the conversation. Other horses, I have another horse that would get excited, and he's a pain. He'd get excited if he saw horses moving and probably would decide that being worried about them was more important than finishing his breakfast. I'll just say that. Okay, so we'll get off the thoroughbred subject. He wouldn't be able to be expected to stay in while all the other horses got moved so he could finish his breakfast, because his anxiety about everybody being moved would stop him from continuing to eat at all. So he was a horse that required me to actually get up earlier to feed, so he had more time to feed. The other thing that I did to help him was I fed him, so he got, let's just say he did get more, but I'm just going to do this for mathematics. Say he got 2 quarts in the morning and 2 quarts at night. Instead, and let's say they're in at night. Instead of 2 quarts in the morning, he would get 1.5 quarts in the morning, and he would get 2.5 quarts at night, because he was a grazer. I didn't have to worry about him galloping it up. Galloping. What is it? Gulping. Like, gallop doesn't sound like the right word. I didn't have to worry about him gulping it down and finding himself impacted or anything like that, because he was a grazer. He could not eat fast. So I would give him 3/4 of a meal at night and quarter of his meal in the morning, so that way he had longer time to eat, but he never lost the actual nourishment. So that was one of the adjustments that I made for him. And the other adjustment, like I said, is I would get up early for him. Is your horse at a barn where they would do that? That's one question. What's your barn's policy about the horse leaving food behind? Do they throw it away and give you fresh in the morning? Do they charge you extra and give you fresh in the morning? I mean, in that case, that kind of depends. I think if I thought my horse, it was either I pay more for them to give my horse fresh food each time. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would just move my horse to a place that would better accommodate him, or if I'd be willing to just pay more so that my horse, can stay at that particular facility, but also not risk losing weight. Not sure how I would handle that. It would really depend on how much I love where I'm at. If I love where I'm at, that means I love the people. And if I love the people would try to do something to accommodate my horse's needs. But if you have a horse that has special needs in a barn, often, you pay more anyway. And then on the subject of hay left behind. How many times do you make a horse pick through the same hay you left behind? How many times does your barn make the horse pick through the same hay? And the reason I'm asking that is because if the rest of the barn has eaten the same bale of hay and the one horse leaves it behind, I will leave those flakes for the horse that was attached to those flakes, for them to pick through still one more day, but I add to it. I will provide them with half of what they normally would get in addition to what they left behind. And I'll give them one more day to clean that up. If all the other horses have eaten the hay just fine, that means that this horse is either being picky or didn't feel like eating their hay that night for whatever reason. But the hay itself is not what's in question. So I would leave the hay behind. It's a little bit different than with the grain. If after the second time I offer them the same hay, they leave it behind, then I consider there to be something wrong. Could just be that they urinated on it and, messed it up, and therefore won't eat it now because they messed it. So the next feeding, I will remove that hay, or I have a horse that's a stall walker, and he's quite expensive for bedding. So what I'll do is I'll take any hay that another horse hasn't eaten, and I will recycle it and turn it into bedding for the stall walker. So I do get at least some of my money's worth out of that hay. But I don't tell that horse, hey, this is the hay I provided for you. You eat it or you get nothing. It's not like one of those, you eat it or you go to bed without dinner. If it were a field and he found something he didn't like about it, he would move on to a different patch of grass. He wouldn't stay there and go, well, that's all I get, so I better figure out how to like it. Or, the local fox came through and, marked this spot right here, and now I'm stuck trying to eat it. Like they would not stand and eat something or force themselves to eat something that they otherwise can just move on from. And since we don't provide them the opportunity to just pick and choose, we have to do that for them. All right, so that's my question is, what do you do? What's your policy on hay and grain being left behind? I would never take grain that was left behind. So if you were to say, well, then you put the grain back in the grain bin, I would never do that, because especially a horse that's missing teeth is going to have less control of their salivation. That grain gets expanded while they're eating, because they're dripping their salivation into the grain. So even the pellets are all, getting spongy and stuff like that. I would never take moist grain and put it back in my dry grain bin. I would be leery even about putting it in its own personal container, because of the moisture. Because I don't know how long before that could take on a spoiled. Because I've smelt even my water buckets where like a horse has gone from their grain bucket to their water bucket and dropped grain out of their mouth into the water bucket. And if you are somebody who cares for your own horse, you know what that smells like. So I can't imagine saving the grain all day and allowing it to maybe even ferment in some way, and then ask your horse, oh yeah, nope, you didn't finish it this morning, you got to eat it today. So pretty much I don't ask a horse to eat leftover grain. The only thing that I would maybe consider, which I've not done, but it's popping into my head now, is if you have another horse that's pastured with that horse. I wouldn't do it with like a horse that's not otherwise associated with that horse, but if the horse is known to leave grain behind, maybe feed the other pasture mate the scraps. Because they're eating the same grass, they're drinking out of the same water tubs and stuff like that. So for the most part, they're swapping spit anyway. Maybe I would do something like that. I've never done that, but I would say possibly. I mean, and you've seen horses that if they're fed outside, they jump from grain bin to grain bin on each other. Possibly I would do it that way if I was worried about waste and the financial aspect of waste. I think I would cut another horse's grain at feeding time with the expectation that I'm going to be transferring this horse's grain to them at the end. If they're not going to eat it, they're not going to eat it. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm taking it away from. So yeah, if I had to, if I thought I was really that worried about how much that was costing me, I wouldn't throw the grain away. I'd probably provide it somehow in a balancing act with another horse that horse is pastured with. Hay, no, I don't. Sometimes I might offer another horse's wasted hay to a horse that I know. I don't know if anyone remembers the Life cereal commercial, you know, give it to Mikey. Mikey likes it. Mikey will eat anything. I have a horse I consider a Mikey who probably would eat somebody else's hay. And again, you know, a horse that they're otherwise exposed to. Yeah, so I'm just curious. And if you don't know what your farm's policy is and you trust that you're going to get an honest answer, that's the other thing, right? I know barns that don't even give your horse their supplements and just, you know, dump a little off into a muck bucket on their way past or whatever so that they make it look like they've been giving the supplements. I think SmartPak is a wonderful thing because you're more likely to get your horse's supplements provided. I'm not saying, I'm just saying I know farms that say they have too many horses to be bothered with that. I actually worked at a dog kennel that when the owner picked up the dog, part of the policy of when the person was sent in to go get the dog for the owner was to also go into the med room and calculate how many days that dog would have been there and take out that many supplement pills so that you didn't have to be bothered, I guess, during feeding time. I was a teenager, so I don't even know if that kennel would still exist. I'm not like throwing anybody under the bus or whatever, but I'm just saying there are facilities that don't do what you ask them to do. There's facilities that don't feed the grain that you're asking them to feed, but will say yes to you when you ask if you can have that feed. Been around a long time is all I'm saying, and not everybody does what they say they're doing. And I've seen some of the bigger barns not do what they say they do. So if you trust whoever you talk to that they're going to give you the true answer, then I'm interested to know what your barn's policy is, and or what you do when you have a horse that maybe is missing teeth and is a slow eater, or gets anxious when other horses are moved around and stops eating because of that. What do you do with the grain? Do you ask the horse to eat it again later? Do you not provide it to them? Do you give them less because you don't think they'll eat? Do you do what I did, where you just change the way, like the way you dispense the food, like morning, if they get turned out in the morning, their breakfast would be a little bit lighter than their dinner was, and probably by the time you fed them breakfast, they finally finished their dinner. Just curious. Didn't mean to throw any barns under the bus. And like I said, that dog kennel probably doesn't even exist anymore, and I wouldn't remember the name of it anyway. It was in a different state. So, yeah, but yeah, I don't, like I said, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I do know places that don't exactly do what they say they do. Curious.